Minister shutting up shop for the bank holiday weekend because we just carry on working. For those campaigning ahead of the referendum on Britain's membership of the EU, they're also carrying on working. They're not taking any time off to catch up on the DIY. This morning, former Prime Minister John Major took aim at those arguing to leave, saying the only place they would find, quote, undiluted sovereignty in the modern world was in North Korea. And just a few hours ago, UKIP leader Nigel Farage, who of course is campaigning to leave, has tried to turn the debate to what he sees as his strongest card, immigration. Here he is, speaking in central London, where he discussed immigration and the sexual attacks in Cologne on New Year's Eve.
We saw the mass open sexual molestation of hundreds of women appearing in public. And frankly, if we're prepared to accept, or if Germany and Sweden are prepared to accept, unlimited numbers of young males from countries and cultures where women are at best second-class citizens, then frankly, what do you expect? And I do not want those young men who were outside Cologne train station to have one of these in a few short years and to be able to come to our country.
And Nigel Farage is here in the studio. Let's look at this issue of border controls. Not the right to come and work here, which I understand would change if we were to leave the EU. I mean, anyone who comes into the UK, even from the EU, I mean, they're checked. We stop criminals, we stop terrorists at the border.
No, we don't.
That won't change.
No, we don't. The only people we can stop who've got EU passports are people who pose a direct threat to national security, namely terrorists. People with criminal records, even serious criminal records, we have no right to stop under EU membership.
But we have
rules.
stopped thousands coming in.
There's an awful lot we don't stop, and there are people with whether it's burglary or sexual assaults. It's very difficult for us to stop people with criminal records coming into Britain. And certainly, once they're in Britain, it's almost impossible to stop them residing here. The point I'm making is this. We cannot completely insulate ourselves from the modern world, from the risks of terrorism and all of these things. But what we can do is make ourselves a little bit safer by getting back control of our borders.
But you won't be able to stop people coming in with, even if we're outside the EU, if they've got EU passports, unless, are you going to go for a visa system?
Well, what I'm saying is that let's say for argument's sake, the people who were outside Cologne's train station on New Year's Eve get convictions in Germany, all right? They then, in 5 years, 6 years, have a German passport, which is the same as a British passport. They can come to Britain, they can settle here. We could, at that moment in time, as a free country, stop them from entering the workplace and settling here.
But there's a problem with that, because anybody convicted under German law will not get a German passport. Under German law, you need to have a crime-free record for up to 8 years before you can get a German passport. So if they're convicted, they will be ineligible for a German passport.
In theory, German citizenship is 8 years. In Hungary, it's about 3 years.
But you don't get it at all if you get a criminal record.
I think there is a feeling that all of that will be ignored, given the scale of the problem that Merkel faces. I mean, we're only 1 year in. We're 1 year in to Merkel's open door. The evidence thus far this year is that the numbers coming into Europe are many, many times bigger than they were last year.
Right, but it's 8 years before you can get a German passport. That's what citizenship is. Well, I see no politician in Germany recommending it's going to change. You've got to speak the language. You've got to have a clean criminal record. So none of the Cologne attackers who've been convicted would be accepted under German law, and therefore they couldn't come here. I mean, it's an Aunt Sally.
Very few of them are going to be convicted. Do we want to protect?
No, but you said the ones predicted could still come here,
or don't we want to protect ourselves? That's the question. Are we a safer nation with border controls or without them?
But my point is that we still have that ability to control the border for the kind of people you're talking about, and that doesn't change whether we're in or out of the EU.
We cannot stop criminals coming into this country if they've got an EU passport. Simple as.
The biggest threat to this country, I would suggest, given the recent record, is not from people coming from the outside to do us harm. It's homegrown terrorism. It's people with British passports. That was 7/7. That was the attack on Lee Rigby. That's most of the attacks at the moment. This leaving the EU would make no difference to that.
Well, given that we have a huge homegrown problem already, which is our own fault, why on earth would you wish to compound that? And given that 2 of the 8 attackers in Paris had come back into France through the Greek islands, posing as migrants, given that the head of Europol says that up to 5,000 jihadis have come into Europe in the last 18 months posing as migrants, you can see the scale of the problem. Well, yes, I agree. We have a problem. We cannot insulate ourselves completely from global problems, but goodness me, we can relieve the pressure.
Let's come on to the economic arguments. Are you making more of the immigration case because you fear that you're losing the economic battle?
Well, I think this. I think that it's very clear that what the Remain camp have tried to do is pretty much what they did 40 years ago, actually. It's to use arguments about trade. Now, I believe they're spurious arguments. My own view is that even with no successful renegotiation and just trading on WTO rules, we'd still be better off than we are now, because the maximum cost of tariffs would only be 2/3 of what our net contribution is. However, the Leave camp have been playing in their own half of the pitch, defending the goal against these constant attacks from the international community, whether it's the IMF or the OECD or Obama or Uncle Tom Cobley. And where they're vulnerable on the question of immigration. They know that there is no way we can control the numbers coming to Britain as members of the European Union. And what I'm saying this morning is I'm urging the Leave camp to get onto the other half of the pitch and start attacking their goal.
You said that there would be no damage done to the British economy if we leave. And you've got Patrick Minford now, a leading economist, on your side with 7 other economists. They're author of Economists for Brexit. But Patrick Minford says that if we leave the EU, it would, quote, eliminate manufacturing in the UK. Eliminate manufacturing. And he's on your side.
Patrick Minford says that manufacturers would be cheaper and we'd have the ability to have cheaper energy. So Patrick Minford says we would be better off by 4% per annum not being part of the EU.
Yeah, but he also says if we left the EU, it seems likely that we would mostly eliminate manufacturing, leaving mainly industries such as design, marketing and high-tech, in other words, services. That's someone on your side of the argument. And anybody employed in manufacturing would think, well, why would I vote for that to be eliminated?
He takes the view that we're moving from a manufacturing to a service
Well, but we know
sector.
that.
I'm not as negative as that. I mean, I was in Sheffield last week, Andrew. I went to a steel foundry where his energy bill is 60,000 quid a month. His competitors in America and India have energy bills of 30,000 a month. I think, outside the EU, freed from some of the obligations that Blair signed us up to, we could give manufacturing a better chance.
But we could change our energy policy towards manufacturing now. We don't have to leave the EU. The Germans have. French and German electricity for energy-intensive users is between 50% and 1/3 of what ours are. Last time I looked, France and Germany were in the EU. That's a British policy that's done that.
There's no question that George Osborne has been a disaster for manufacturing and has made the initial EU route worse. However, this whole debate gets back to where we started. I don't think Joe Soap, sitting watching this, hearing one side saying we're going to be better off, one side saying we're going to be worse off, is going to be convinced by any of it. I think there'll be a score draw on economics because people will not get it and will not understand it. If we want to win, we have to make the argument, not just for making our own laws, being in charge of our destiny, but controlling our borders, controlling immigration, and being able to have something like the Australian-style point system to measure the quantity and quality of who comes to Britain. If we get there, we will then motivate and mobilise Leave voters, and that's how we win.
But you see, the Vote Leave campaign, the official campaign, they don't agree with you, do they? They don't think it's a score draw in economics. They think they're winning the economic argument. And actually, on the case of economics, if you look down at the polling, on the economic case, the Remain people are winning by a substantial amount. And they think that you and others banging on about immigration, it consolidates your core, but it doesn't reach out to the wider British public who, by and large, have come to terms with immigration.
And they are wrong. They're wrong. All the polling of the undecided shows that by a massive factor, immigration, controlling our borders, is the factor that would swing undecided voters one way or the other. However, we've moved on. We've moved on. The number of genuinely undecided voters now is quite small. It's changed a lot over the course of the last month. How do we know that? Consistent polling. Some polls show it at 5%, some polls show it at 18%. But whatever, Many undecideds won't vote. Of those who are undecided but say they will vote, maybe it is 12, 13%, something like that. It's not a massive number. This referendum now gets one on turnout, gets one on passion. And I think the advantage that Leave has over Remain is that people who've made their minds up to leave generally feel it quite strongly and quite passionately. And we have to mobilise. If we get every person in this country who says they want to leave, and the big hook for nearly all of them, or the majority of them, is the immigration argument, we make that point, we mobilise them to vote, we will win this referendum.
You, Toby Young, are part of the Leave campaign, I believe. You want us to leave the European Union. What do you think of Nigel Farage's approach, and how do you think the campaign's going from your point of view so far?
Well, on the one hand, I share some of the concerns you just flagged up, which is that people who are concerned about the immigration and security risks that comes from freedom of movement and the enlargement of the EU are probably already going to vote Leave, and that the Vote Leave campaign should be focusing on alleviating the anxiety about the economic risks that's been whisked up by the Remain campaign. But I also think that Nigel has a point. I think the number of don't knows are shrinking, and I also think that the outcome, the result, will in large part hinge on how great the turnout is. And if you can mobilise the Leavers, and I think the Leavers generally are more passionate, they care more about this issue than the Remainers, then that is one way to win, and this is an issue that they do care deeply about.
Are you Leave or Remain?
I mean, I think the idea of the right wing debating how, leaving Europe could solve problems created by the right wing is frankly laughable.
But before you get into that, just are you Leave or Remain?
On that basis, I am Remain, because
Remain.
the problems that you want to fix are caused by right-wing policies. It's not migration that has caused a drain on access to resources and jobs. It's austerity, and it's the Conservative policies that have diminished trade and growth and production and the British economy, not migration and not the EU. So the problems that you're seeking to fix are not, they're not EU problems, they're right-wing austerity problems.
Just to come back on the austerity point, Rachel, the IFS calculated that over the 5-year term of the coalition, they saved 36 billion in total from austerity measures. That is less than even our net contribution to the EU in the same period. So to blame our problems on austerity rather than the EU is nonsensical.
The fact that people are worried about jobs, stagnating wages and access to resources is nothing to do with migration. Statistic after statistic has shown that migrants are not a drain on any of those things.
I tell you what statistics do say. They say that for the average worker, their real income has declined by 10% since 2008, and that is because we have oversupply in the labour market in this country. And I take issue with you on one thing. I don't think the case for Brexit or against Brexit has anything to do with left or right-wing politics. It's a basic question of democracy, of sovereignty, of controlling our borders and putting our own people first. And there are many millions of Labour voters who are attracted to that message.
All right, we need to move on.
Big Man Tyrone here. Make sure to subscribe to the wicked awesome Robin Hood UKIP YouTube website. He exposes the leftist crops on the British Brainwashing Corporation. Nice.